How's it going? Today, I wanted to talk about Jakobs weapons in Borderlands, more specifically Borderlands 2, and how they would act if they could be elemental. There are a few Jakobs weapons that are elemental, however, they are locked to a specific element. The Greed and Hot Mama are locked to fire, the Twister is locked to shock, and finally, the Stink Pot is locked to corrosive. I'm going to be testing a few unique Jakobs weapons in this video. The first two will be the Maggie and the Becca, which are two weapons that cannot spawn with an element. And then for the third and fourth weapons, I'm testing the Stink Pot and the Hot Mama, which are locked to a specific element. That can now be tested with any element. With that out of the way, let's get into the gameplay, and then I'll give my final thoughts at the end of the video. The way that I'm going to make this work is by using the spare parts mod, which will allow me to put elements onto the Jakobs guns. The first gun that I'm going to be showing off is the Maggie, and I decided to build a Salvador around it. So I have a Maggie of each element here, an antagonist, the Suave Renegade, the Sheriff's Badge, the Crossfire for slagging, and then this is the build that I used, and I got some extra pistol damage and then Divergent Likeness as well. So let me run around Opportunity and show it off. Because there's mainly just enemies who need their shield stripped and then corrosive, I'm gonna just take my fire one off because then it's a little bit easier to switch between the weapons. So then I can just use my scroll wheel and it switches the first one. But let's go test it out. I'm playing on OP10 right now. The money shot does a lot of damage, which is good. And I also wanted to show that this is possible without using a B shield, because you just don't need a B shield for this build. Or for any of the builds I'm going to be showing in this video, actually. But I can see why Jakobs weapons aren't usually elemental, except for some rare examples like the Greed, Stink Pot, stuff like that. But this is pretty ridiculous. Even the slag one does a good amount of damage because it's just a Jakobs, so it's high damage already. Yeah, this is destroying. This is a pretty good build. This is a fun build too. There's such a high slag chance as well because of how many projectiles there are. That makes it a lot easier. Wow, that just deletes them. Especially once you get overkill. That's some pretty good damage. Get some overkill there. Yeah, this is shredding through Wilhelm's health bar. Alright. Wow, yeah, when you get double money shot, and there we go, Wilhelm down. Yeah, this is a good combo. Health bar's a little more tanky for sure, but this is OP10. Oh yeah. Wow. And there we go. And an electric leech. Alright. Honestly, rate this Maggie build probably a 9 out of 10. This was really fun. It did a good amount of damage to mobs, and it even did really good against bosses too, especially for OP10. Now let's move on to the next one. For the second one, I'm going to be focusing on the Becca, and I built a Maya around it. I have a Becca of each element, the antagonist again. I chose the Blurred Trickster, and I'm not sure how great this is, there might be better ones, but I still found that it worked out just fine. I'm using each element Bone of the Ancients, and then a Crossfire for slagging, and this is my build at the moment, with Chain Reaction and Kinetic Reflection buffed up. Wow. That does an insane amount of damage. Let's test out the shock one on the shield. That melts it. Wow, especially when they're phase locked. The Becca is ridiculous. Oh, I think I just killed so many of them. As long as you have a bit of range, this is ridiculous. Oh yeah, that destroyed it pretty quickly. The B would make this so much better, but I wanted to show that you don't need the B to make any of these builds good. Bonehead 2.0, let's see how it goes. Oh, that's a junk loader, but close enough. Wow. OP10 destroyed. Okay. Definitely takes a few more shots to take down Saturn. B shield buffs the damage quite a bit. But even without it, it's a very good build. Overall, I'd say this Maya build's probably a 7.5 out of 10. It's really good for mobbing, I think better than the Maggie, but at the same time, the bossing isn't quite as good unless you're using the B shield. Then it's buffed pretty heavily. All in all, this is a fun build, and yeah, I think a 7.5. For the third build, I decided to use the Stink Pot. The Stink Pot is one of the rare Jakobs weapons that does spawn with an element. Usually it only comes in corrosive, but I was able to make one of every element, and I made a plain explosive one as well. I'm using the antagonist, and this is nowhere near a perfect one, and you just don't need one. I got the Expert Grenadier class mod on, the Mouthwash for extra assault rifle damage, and then a Crossfire for slagging. Here's what my build looks like right now. I have extra into impact, tons of grenades, I have boosted grenade damage, and rocket launcher damage, which I think all applies to these explosions. Let's test it out. Even without slag, this is ripping through these guys. It's doing tons of damage. The plain explosive one might do even more damage. This thing is ridiculous. Especially after I get a kill skill. This honestly might be my favorite build yet. I will say with the Stink Pot, I think that the Stink Pot is a much better mobbing weapon than it is a bossing weapon. Because even with Badma here, where I can shoot straight through a shield, it's not doing a whole lot of damage. And it just burns through ammo super quick. I still think this is easily an 8 out of 10. It does great damage. It works super well on Krieg as well. The Maggie was fun, so was the Becca. The Stink Pot definitely takes the win for the most fun though. Now let's move on to the final one on Zero. Now for the final build, I decided to choose the Hot Mama and Zero. And it's not really the Hot Mama anymore because there's no fire. I have a corrosive, a non-elemental, which I don't think I'm going to use because it kind of defeats the purpose of this whole video, a shock one, a slag one, a non-perfect antagonist, the sniper, slag crossfire, and then I decided to use the blood of the seraphs. I'm sure that there are better relics for this, but this is the one that I decided to use to just help Zero be a little bit more tanky. And here's my build, very heavily focused around sniping, but I was still able to get some kill skill right here, execute, Death Blossom, and Death Mark. Overall, pretty good build, I think. Now let's go test it out. I'll test out the non-elemental one once, but I'm pretty sure it's just going to be the same as a Jakobs sniper, and it kind of takes away the cool aspect of the Hot Mama. Yep, it's a good sniper, but pretty boring. Now for the actual fun part, I get to use the corrosive sniper. I have a feeling this thing is going to be really good. Wow, one shot. Let's test out the shock one. Wow. This is really good. Wow. The fire rate's the only thing that's a little bit slow, but it's a Jakobs sniper. So what do you expect? And that shredded through him. I'll test this on Laney White and then Smash Head, and then I think I'll end it there. I used the slag one, I think. Oh yeah, that was a good amount of damage. Just stripped the shield right off. I'm just struggling to hit a headshot, but there we go. Laney White down. Let's get him death marked, and then I think I got a little bore damage there. Yeah, this is fantastic for mobbing, but really bad for boss damage, I think. Well, that's where I'm going to end it for the builds, and now I'll just give my final closing thoughts. I had a great time experimenting with elemental Jakobs weapons. I have a few thoughts to share. The first being that I understand why Jakobs weapons don't usually spawn with an element unless they're unique. They deal too much base damage, so adding an element makes them too good. An example of this would be the Hellwalker from Borderlands 3. Even though that's my favorite BL3 weapon, it's also very strong. The next thing that I would like to see more of is specific elemental Jakobs weapons like the Twister and Stink Pot. I think that elemental Jakobs weapons can be much more balanced if they're locked to one element. These uniques also make Jakobs weapons feel fresh. Now for how the builds I showed off in the video performed. I think that the Maggie build on Salvador was the strongest. It dealt with smaller enemies quickly and also easily did the most amount of damage to bosses. The fact that Salvador was the character I chose for this section definitely added to why it was so good. Nonetheless, I think this would be good on any character. The other build that really stood out to me as well was the Stink Pot. The fire and explosive elements were amazing for mobbing, however the damage against bosses wasn't great. Even though I used the stink pot on Axton, I think it could work great on Krieg as well. This was a fun video to make. If you enjoyed, leave a like. Subscribe if you want to see more Borderlands and gaming content from me. I also encourage you to leave a comment. I read them all and respond to most. Have a great rest of your day. See ya.